She didn't call me. She didn't sit me down. She didn't even look at me when she decided to leave. She sent an email. My wife, Vivian Aldridge, wrote, "I'll be filing for separation. Please respect my privacy." And I replied, "Of course." That was the moment everything in my life split into two timelines. The one where I thought I understood my marriage, and the one where I realized I never did. We lived in a quiet part of Greenwich, Connecticut, the kind of neighborhood where people don't raise their voices, where problems are handled behind closed doors and smiles are maintained in public, where appearances matter more than explanations. Vivian fit that world perfectly, composed, articulate, and always just distant enough to feel slightly out of reach. I used to think that distance was elegance. Now I know it was something else. I didn't reply to her email right away. I read it 3 times. Then I checked the timestamp. 10:15 a.m. Sent from her office. I was sitting in our kitchen when I opened it. The same kitchen where we had dinner the night before. The same place where she had asked me if I wanted more coffee. Nothing in her voice had hinted at what she had already decided. That's what stayed with me. Not the separation, not even the email, but the calm. I replied, "Of course." Not because I understood, but because I didn't want to look like the man who panics when things fall apart. And in our world, panic is a weakness people remember. Vivian didn't respond. She didn't call that night. She didn't come home. I found out through our house manager, Elaine, that Vivian had arranged to stay in a furnished apartment downtown. Everything had been planned in advance. Quietly, precisely, without a single conversation. That was the first time I felt something close to humiliation. Not because she was leaving, but because she had already built an exit while I was still living inside what I thought was our life. I didn't chase her. I didn't show up at her office. I didn't ask questions. Instead, I went to work. My name is Carter Whitfield. I run a private investment firm. In my world, emotional reactions are liabilities, and information is power. So I started collecting information. At first, I told myself it was about understanding, trying to figure out what went wrong, trying to piece together the gap between the dinner we shared and the email she sent. But the more I looked, the more I realized this wasn't sudden. There were patterns, shorter conversations over the past few months, more time spent at work, subtle changes in tone that I had dismissed as stress. I wasn't blind. I was comfortable. And comfort makes you ignore things that don't fit your version of reality. About a week later, I received a formal notice from her attorney. Separation proceedings had officially begun. Everything was outlined clearly. Assets, property, timelines. It was clean, efficient, almost clinical, like a business transaction. And that's when I understood something important. This wasn't emotional for her. It was strategic. Before we go further, tell me this. If someone ends a marriage without a single real conversation, do you think it's honesty or control? Because I started to see it as control. Vivian wasn't avoiding conflict. She was managing it. She was choosing the setting, the timing, and the narrative. And she expected me to follow it. For a while, I did. I signed documents. I responded through attorneys. I kept everything polite and distant. But something didn't sit right. Not anger, not betrayal. Something quieter. Inconsistency. There were financial movements I didn't recognize. Accounts that had been adjusted months before her email. Transfers that were technically legal, but carefully timed. It wasn't theft. It was positioning. She had been preparing not just to leave, but to land safely. And suddenly, the separation wasn't just about us. It was about leverage. I didn't confront her. I didn't accuse her. Instead, I requested a meeting. Not through emotion, through her attorney. She agreed. We met in a neutral conference room downtown. No raised voices. No dramatic entrances. Just 2 people sitting across a polished table. Vivian looked exactly the same. Composed. Controlled. Unreadable. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She simply said, "I assume you've reviewed everything." I nodded. Then I asked one question. "When did you decide?" She paused, just for a second. Then she said, "It doesn't matter." That answer told me everything, because it meant she wasn't interested in honesty, only outcome. So I shifted, not emotionally, strategically. I stopped trying to understand her, and I started understanding the situation. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with my legal team. not to fight her, but to balance what had already been set in motion. We uncovered more details. Nothing illegal, nothing explosive, but enough to change the narrative. Enough to show that the separation wasn't as simple as she presented it. And that mattered, because in our world, perception influences everything. Settlements, reputation, future opportunities. Vivian had built her exit quietly, but she had assumed I would stay passive. I didn't. At our next meeting, the tone was different. Still calm, still controlled, but no longer one-sided. Her attorney adjusted his posture. Vivian listened more carefully, not because I attacked, but because I showed I wasn't unaware. That was the turning point. Not a dramatic moment, not a confrontation, just a shift from being managed to being involved. From that point on, everything became more balanced. Negotiations changed, timelines shifted, terms were revised. Not dramatically, but enough to reflect reality instead of assumption. Vivian never admitted anything. She never explained her reasons. And eventually, I stopped needing her to, because the truth wasn't in what she said. It was in what she did. Months later, the separation was finalized. Clean, professional, publicly unremarkable. Exactly the way she wanted it. But privately, it wasn't the story she had planned. And that was enough. The last time I saw her, she didn't look relieved. She didn't look emotional. She looked resolved, like someone who had completed a decision, not escaped one. And I realized something I hadn't seen before. This wasn't about me. It never was. It was about control. Over her life. Over her narrative. Over uncertainty. And the email was just the safest way to begin that process. So I let her have it. The distance. The silence. The privacy she asked for. Because in the end, I didn't need answers from her. I needed clarity for myself. And I got it. Sometimes people don't leave loudly. They leave carefully. And sometimes the most important thing you can do is not chase the explanation, but understand the pattern. Before we close this, I want to ask you something. If someone exits your life with precision instead of emotion, do you respect it or question it? Because the answer says more about you than it does about them.